Donald J. Trump, he's probably going to run for president again in 2024. Again, as we speak, we're still talking about the FBI raiding his residence at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, Palm Beach, and the right-wing press, on my reading, are absolutely hysterical about the FBI, the Biden administration, Justice Department poking around an ex-president's residence looking for boxes of purloined papers. I feel like sometimes, and people talk about seceding from the country, California, et cetera. The heated antagonisms between the camps, the red and the blue. I don't know if we're not on a path to, if not civil war, then protracted conflict. I mean, there will be a Republican administration, there'll be a Democratic administration, there'll be recrimination, there'll be payback, there'll be investigations, there'll be hearings. Are you optimistic about the future of political culture in the United States? Are we growing further and further apart? The big sort, people are moving around, they're affiliating. The technology of social media and the internet, which allows us to create worlds for ourselves that consist only of people who think like ourselves, and so on. I'm asking what you see as the future for American political culture going forward from your perspective.
Sure. Well, I think certainly regression is always a possibility. The United States collapsing into some kind of second civil war. I don't see that as the most likely scenario, but I won't discount the fact that there is a possibility. We could argue about what that possibility is. Ultimately, I would say, optimism's like a bet about the future, and hope is, I'd say, a more central virtue to this question. Being, a first-generation American, I have a deep love of America just as my own identity. And I'd say that the forces that have brought about America in world history, I mean, in some ways, the emergence of the American nation is one of the greatest events in human history. I'd say that those forces can't be so easily vanquished, and that I do have a confidence, let's call it, that we will grow our way out of this, but certainly not without pain and recrimination and the kind of craziness that we're seeing now. I mean, we're sort of passing through this crucible of political conflict, but I think that the possibility that this conflict can bring about our growth as a society, I mean, that's what we're working for. So obviously, we're optimistic about its potential.
Do you and Mackie talk about that in your book, Political Development?
Sure. Conscious Leadership is the name of the book.
I beg your pardon.
Yeah, Conscious Leadership. So at the end, I wrote an appendix which kind of stands alone. It's called Cultivating Cultural Intelligence. So this idea of cultural intelligence, as we're defining it, is the ability to kind of see what worldview defines your identity. And within the culture war, recognize that the worldviews you oppose have certainly pathologies which cause you to oppose them, but also positive values which you can value yourself. That is, that you can become more culturally intelligent by expanding the scope of what you're able to value. And that means valuing some of the values of these worldviews that you oppose. So it's a practice. It's a little bit like emotional intelligence. Like in the 90s, emotional intelligence was promoted as a leadership skill. And while the cultural space we're working to create is more than just a leadership skill, this is at least one way that we can attempt to mainstream it and make it useful, is by talking about cultural intelligence and how it works. So in the appendix, we talk about these worldviews. We talk about the positives and the negatives of each, how they're ultimately, despite their conflicts, how they're interdependent, how they need each other, how, as I said, the traditional, successful traditionalism is a foundation for successful modernity. And despite its rejection, the conditions of modernity are absolutely necessary for progressive postmodernism. Without the prosperity and the liberty and all the gifts of modernity, the progressive culture would never be able to get off the ground. So understanding the gifts of each one of these and how they can, in fact, be integrated into a larger whole without discounting the negatives of each. This is this practice of cultural intelligence, and it's very useful for business people, especially who are working with stakeholders who represent all these different worldviews in the same place.
Yeah, I think that's the message that our friend Stephanie wanted me to take, which is that there's something to be learned from listening and trying to understand the worldview of people who have a different position than I do. And that's not the same thing as ceding uh, ground. That's actually growth for me. It's not a zero sum. It's not a zero sum game.
Right. Like I said, it's a judo move. We're trying to do what progressive postmodernism can't. Right. So they say that they want to be more inclusive, but their sense of inclusivity only extends to those who share their worldview. Right. So
Right.
we want to be even more inclusive than progressive postmodernism, and not only include those who've been marginalized or victimized. We want to include modernists and traditionalists and people who make meaning from the entire spectrum of cultural evolution, and do so in a way that honors each one of these worldviews and recognizes them as stakeholders in our democracy.